Yeah, Warriors, we're taking it down. Raise your voices and stare at this town. We're the champions of craft beer sport. Tolkien audio, we hold down the fort.
All right, away we go. A post-NHL Trade Deadline edition of the podcast. We're going to do probably a couple of these, actually, just bang out some quick thoughts, maybe no more than a few minutes. And then certainly on the Monday show, Rob will be back in studio with me, and we'll debate some of these a little more thoroughly. But I just wanted to give some quick hit thoughts on a couple of things here. We'll start with the Senators. This will probably be all Senators. Maybe I'll do another one here in a little while on the Leafs, and then maybe another one a little later after that on everybody else. We'll see how this rolls out. I am going to have a pint. It's been a long day of trades, long day of taking notes, long day of, just keeping an eye on all of this stuff. As many of you know, I was out of town there for a little while. When I'm out of there, or when I'm down there, I often grab hold of an old favorite or two that doesn't require a whole lot of conversation. You've heard me talk about it on this show before. From the Old Flame Brewing Company, their Raven. It is a black lager clocking in right around where a lager should clock in at. So nothing overly noteworthy there that we need to spend any kind of time on. Nothing overly risky in a pint like that. It's just kind of an old flame, an old friend, right? Tons of risk in what the Sens did in giving up one of Brady's old friends. Sometimes happy accident. You just stumble right into these things. Big trade early in the day. We'll get to the second trade here in a few minutes, but the marquee one sees Josh Norris headed out the door with Jacob Bernard-Docker going to Buffalo. And in return, they get Dennis Gilbert, who's just a guy, kind of a seventh defenseman, tough guy. Whether or not he plays much for them remains to be seen, but I guess that's to kind of balance out the loss of depth defenseman Jacob Bernard-Docker. But the big piece coming back is obviously Dylan Cousins, who is a year younger than Josh Norris, makes a little less money than Josh Norris, but has a comparable contract. And frankly, I'm sure the attraction here is that he is far more healthy than Josh Norris. But he's not playing as well as Josh Norris. Now, he does have a 30-goal year under his belt. So does Josh Norris. A 70-point year under his belt, similar to Josh Norris. So there's a lot of comparables in these guys, but it's sort of, what are you looking for, right? What do you trust? What are you trying to accomplish in this deal? And when I say that there was, no risk in the pint I'm trying, but a lot of risk in what the Sens did today, there was sort of a lot of risk no matter what the Sens did with Josh Norris. I'm sure to a certain extent, he feels like a little bit of a ticking time bomb. With these shoulder injuries that he's had, he's a very talented player, but you're never quite sure when the other shoe is going to drop. Every time I'm watching not every time, I don't want to over-exaggerate the thing, but it's not uncommon when you're watching the Sens and you're sort of scrolling through Sens Twitter to see people like, oh, he looks uncomfortable after that hit. And maybe he does a little, maybe he does sometimes, but a lot of that now is sort of subconsciously planted in the fan base's head because we've seen that shoulder injured so many times. And I'm sure that's not totally dissimilar to the way the front office looks at him. And it was no more than like a week ago, I think I mentioned on this show, that Steve Warren, pointed out a camera shot that Hockey Night in Canada had on Josh Norris sitting on the bench. It was sort of zoomed in on him. It was after some contact, and it sort of looked like he's shrugging out that shoulder. Now, look, these are athletes. They get bumped and, jostled around. They're always stretching things out. They're always a little sore. It's possible and probably likely that was a completely innocuous shot. It didn't mean anything. He's not on the brink of some injury. But these are the things that come to your head. When's the next shoe going to drop with this guy? And it felt like management kind of looked at this the same way. And so, okay, what can we swap out that can still be a comparable piece when they're at their best? If Josh Norris is leaving, who's going to be our number 2 center? Can we count on him more than we can count on Josh Norris? And here's where I sort of talk about there being risk in both. If you keep Josh Norris, who in my opinion, and it's not like a super subtle opinion that only I have. A quick look at their statistics tells everybody Josh Norris is having the far superior season to Dylan Cousins. So the risk is keep Josh Norris, and in their next game tomorrow at 12:30, I believe they're playing the Rangers. First hit, and Josh Norris' shoulder's fucked, and you're in big trouble headed down the stretch. Like you've been so many times before, diminished at center and without one of your better players in the lineup. Or do you trade Josh Norris for Dylan Cousins, and Dylan Cousins never circles back to what he was 2 years ago in that 35 goal season, that 70-point season that sort of showed everybody, hey, we think he's arrived. It landed him that contract that he's got now. I think most people believe a change of scenery, getting the hell out of Buffalo. And it's not just the random drive-bys that Rob and I, frankly, hit Buffalo with entirely too often about their city and about the community and the giant tire fire, all these things. Get out of that locker room, which has to be just peppered with negativity. That team has been bad for so long. They've had so many young pieces come in, from your Rasmus Dahleens and your Owen Powers and your Dylan Cousins. And frankly, you brought in Bowen Byram. Before that, it was obviously the Jack Eichel era of young pieces. JJ Peterka. You've had young guys. It's not just this room full of veterans who stink and are riding it out, complaining every day. But it wears on you, right? Losing like that all the time and not seeing any future there, not seeing any reason to believe that it might be better soon. How many guys have they traded away who all went on to have all this success? Sam Reinhart leaves. He becomes one of the best scorers in the league and wins a Stanley Cup, along with a few different guys who were there. Brendan Montour, Evan Rodrigues was down there as well. A bunch of Buffalo Sabres were on that Panthers winning roster. Ryan O'Reilly leaves and wins a Conn Smythe along with the Stanley Cup. Jack Eichel goes to Vegas and wins a Stanley Cup and is fantastic there. Like, it's been a depressing place to play. So I think a lot of people believe a fresh start for Dylan Cousins could be a good thing. And really, and you could apply this a little bit to the Sens. I want to be careful not to compare the Senators and the Sabres, although any longer without the playoffs for the Sens, and it's not going to be a terribly unfair comparison. But when you're bad for this long and you keep saying, yeah, but we got all these young pieces. Look, they're going to grow together. Well, they're not growing. They're still pretty bad. You got to swap some of these guys out. Now, when I say you can apply a little bit of that thinking to the Ottawa Senators, they've been doing this for a long time. And that's one reason I've seen some people feeling a little sympathy for Josh Norris. He's been here through a lot of shit years. He's been through hell on the injury front. And just when they're in the mix, right? Just when they're there battling for a playoff spot and it looks like this thing might be ready to take the next step and the ship's ready to turn the corner, we're punting you out the door. That is rough. But we don't know yet if the Sens are going to make it. And if this was the year, like so many before it, where they were supposed to take the step forward, make it interesting, then get in, they are life and death right now to do that. They are just clinging to it, and they are in a... So this hasn't been the slam dunk step forward year yet, right? So it's not unreasonable to say, yeah, you know what? A piece of our core's got to go too. We need something different here. So yeah, you're worried about Josh Norris and the injury issues. You're worried about your core, and is it getting a little stale, a little stagnant? And so you're not quite to the same degree, or not quite to the same point that the Buffalo Sabres are at. But both of those teams are at a point where it's like something's got to give. Something's got to change. We need to be doing something a little more significant. If Dylan Cousins comes into Ottawa and does rebound, you know, there's every chance, if he was going to be a 30, 35 goal guy like he was 2 years ago, a 70, 75 point guy like he was a couple of years ago, and he brings this different physical element that Josh Norris really didn't, he might not be Ottawa's number 2 center. He might become Ottawa's number 1 center. I'm not predicting that. We'll see. Tim Stützle is very good. But at his best, he was projected out to be a number 1 center. So that's best case scenario for Ottawa, that all of a sudden you have 2 number 1 centers. But it's not a slam dunk. But it is a reason you don't get to just go out and trade Josh Norris. The whole league knows Josh Norris has these injury issues. And at his best, you like him. Good two-way player, good stick in his own zone, good on draws, which is another thing that would disappear if his shoulder falls off again. Great one-timer, good power play guy. Like, there's a lot of things to like about Josh Norris. I think some of you longtime listeners know I was pretty high on Josh Norris before all the injury issues. At one point, I was pretty sure he was going to be better than Nick Suzuki. That hasn't aged particularly well. So I'm not sure I'm holding strong to that being the end result when comparing the careers of these two guys. But I'm not trying to dunk on him. I like him a lot. And if he's going to be healthy, he might be exactly what Buffalo needs. A guy who can come in, project to be one of your top two centers, good in his own end. All the things I just listed as his positive features, he can bring those to Buffalo and hopefully stay healthy, have a change of scenery, bring a different perspective into what may have been becoming a fairly stale locker room, and you know, hopefully has a great career there. But the risk is still there for Ottawa. What if this year, this Dylan Cozens is all that he is? You've given away a pretty big piece to get something substantially worse. So it's a risk. Now, I think it's a risk worth taking. I think it puts a stir, like puts a bit of a jolt into that locker room to go, hey, we're in this. You're right there holding on to that second playoff spot. Get going. We will start making changes, and big changes. Not just trimming around around the edges. This was a guy who was close buddies with Brady Tkachuk. That was pretty evident. I mean, I think most people knew that, but in the scrum earlier today, Brady Tkachuk was pretty emotional when he heard that Josh Norris was leaving, or when he was asked. Obviously, he'd already heard. When he was asked about Josh Norris leaving. It takes some balls from your management group while you're in this playoff race to trade away someone who is having a better season than the guy you're trading for, you know, who is buddies with the captain, with the leader, a popular guy in the room, and go, yeah, this still isn't quite good enough, guys. Get going, or more you will be leaving. So I think it was a risk worth taking, but there is no denying that it is a risk. I know I'm harping on that word a little bit, but I think that's what makes this trade so interesting in my mind, is that the risk was on both sides. Keep him and his arm falls off, or trade him and bring in a guy who maybe doesn't pan out. Now, those are both the worst case scenarios. You could have kept Josh Norris. He never gets hurt again, goes on and has a fantastic career playing beside his buddy Brady. You trade him, you bring in Dylan Cozens, and Dylan Cozens becomes a perennial 30-goal scorer, 70-point guy, big, physical, bringing a little more clearly of the style that Steve Staios and Travis Green want. Dylan Cozens has some snarl to his game that Josh Norris just didn't. Like I said, Josh Norris, good in his own end, good two-way player. There are multiple ways to be effective. Dylan Cozens' way of being effective is a little more in your face, a little more on top of you. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but there are certainly preferences in certain organizations to which one a team is leaning towards. And obviously Ottawa was looking for a little bit more of the snarl. You know, Batherson isn't doing that. Stützle isn't doing that. Giroux really isn't doing that. So you don't have a ton of that in your lineup if when you're walking into the playoffs. Ridley Gregg will bring it. David Perron will bring it. Brady Tkachuk will obviously bring it. They wanted a little more of that. So we'll see how this pans out. But it was a risky move, as I've said a few times, and it was a ballsy move. But I think it was a risk worth taking. This can't be the top out for the Sens, right? See, look, we took the step forward right there. Maybe squeak in the second wild card. Maybe you miss by just a little. Maybe you get in and get beat fast by one of the top seeds, you know, what Florida just did, or whatever that looks like. This is an organization that says where we're at right now is still not good enough. And we're going to take a big swing and hope that it pushes us even further. So, interesting move. I like it, I think, like I said, but not as much as I like the move they made later on. And that may sound a little silly because obviously the Friday morning move had the name value, had the marquee value, right? It's got the Dylan Cousins and the Josh Norris and everything tied into it. What they did right at the deadline, a little less flashy, but not everything that's a good move, not everything that's a smart move is a big move or a flashy move. So they go, and there was a couple of different, I should mention here, I guess before we move off the Josh Norris thing, Buffalo traded a second-round pick as part of that deal, which was really surprising to me because Josh Norris is having the better year, and you're happy to get that guy. But Dylan Cousins, like I said, is younger, slightly lower contract, and, you know, in theory, if anyone was going to get a pick, maybe it should have been Buffalo. I say should have been, like there had to be one. Maybe no one gets one. Maybe you just make the trade straight up the way it was. But I was a little surprised to see Buffalo sending a second-round pick along with Dylan Cousins to get Josh Norris and JBD. And maybe it's no more complicated than, yeah, that's why the Buffalo Sabres are what they are. A lot of not so good moves. So that was interesting. But that second-round pick isn't sticking around in Ottawa. It was punted out the door with a couple other pieces, including Zach Ostapchuk, down to San Jose to get a guy named Fabian Zetterlund. And I'm sure by now, most Sens fans know that name. Maybe some of you didn't beforehand. But immediately after I saw that trade, I was talking to a couple people that I know who are big Sens fans. And some people were a little unsure about this guy. I like this guy a lot. I'm not, like, to the point where I don't really understand why San Jose did this. And I know in the Ottawa market, Zach Ostapchuk has some name value. You know, he's a draft pick, and the Sens were expecting bigger things from him probably by now. But he's got, I believe, 4 points in 50 NHL games. Now he's young, hasn't been given a ton of opportunity, obviously hasn't played overly high in the lineup most of the time. So there's still every opportunity that the kid goes on and has a reasonably good career. But Fabian Zetterlund is established. He's got 17 goals this year, so he's on pace for well over 20. He got 24 last year. And we spent so much time going into the NHL trade deadline talking about the Sens needing to find some secondary scoring. They just can't score quite enough. This is a sneaky good move. You know, we were talking about guys like Ryan Donato, who are having a big year in Chicago. But when that happens, you're sort of buying high on a guy and you're not sure if it's going to continue. Zetterlund's got a bit of a track record here. When you look at his numbers over the last couple of years, they're all trending in the right direction. By all accounts, he was kind of pretty good buddies with Eklund down in San Jose. Like, they kind of had this fun little young Swedish tandem that maybe would have helped them grow as they bring Will Smith in and bring Celebrini in as well. This one catches me really off guard. I don't know why you would trade a perennial 20-goal guy for Zach Ostapchuk, who we don't yet know what he's going to be. Now, I said that second-round pick that went to Ottawa in the Buffalo trade this morning went with Ottawa went with the Ostapchuk down to San Jose, along with a couple other little pieces that aren't as important. So maybe that sweetens the pot a little bit. But San Jose looks like they're at a point where they should be accumulating young players, not draft picks. And so I don't know if a second-round pick, if I'm San Jose, is enough to sweeten the deal for me enough to be trading Zetterlund for Ostapchuk in that pick. I really don't understand. So whatever, you get it. I don't get why San Jose would do this. I like this a lot for Ottawa. Zetterlund is not a play driver. He's not going to be flying up the wing, leading them into the zone and setting things up. But he can find some soft areas there in coverage, a real nice shot. If you put that, like, I think I like him better on like a third line, maybe with like a Shane Pinto probably. If you were to do, you know, what you've been doing, like a Stützle with Brady and with Giroux, then give Dylan Cousins a first look there with David Perron and Drake Batherson, see how that looks. And now see if Shane Pinto can be kind of a guy who sets up for Fabian Zetterlund and frankly cleans up some of the mess for him in the defensive zone as well. I like Pinto's two-way game. I'm not sure you're going to love Zetterlund's. But if you were just out looking for some scoring punch, some secondary scoring to give this offense just a little bit more of a push, then sending out Zach Ostapchuk for this kid, is a really nice piece of business. I sit here a little baffled about how it fell in their laps, why they were able to get that done. And again, maybe similar to what I said about Buffalo, maybe that's just why the Sharks are what the Sharks are. Questionable moves that you didn't need to make, and somebody else, yoink, walks away. I'm picturing that Simpsons quote. You know, that Simpsons clip where the nerds are walking away and Snake walks up and asks if he can inspect their wallets. And that's just, I can't believe that worked, and runs off.
Oh, don't worry, Mr. Simpson. We can take care of ourselves.
Wallet inspector.
Oh, here you go. I believe that's all in order.
I can't believe that worked.
Hey, that's not the wallet inspector.
That's what this feels like to me a little bit. Maybe I'm being a little over the top. Fabian Zetterlund is not about to become a 45-goal guy that ends up in the Ring of Honor at the CTC or anything. But as I said, your best moves, your nicest pickups, don't have to be marquee moves. Don't have to be top guys. Just quick little swap of things that are a little under the radar. You walk away with, in my opinion, the far better piece. That's a nice day for Ottawa. You know, all in all, I do think I like the shakeup. You are having to rely on the fact that hopefully Dylan Cousins, when he walks in, different look, different locker room, different coach, different set of expectations, different, frankly, different level of pressure. Maybe, for some guys, it's good to be told, hey, get your shit together, because what you were doing down in Buffalo obviously wasn't good enough. We're in it here. We are in a playoff race right now. We don't have a whole lot of time for you to get comfortable, so get in there and get your ass moving. Some guys respond to that. Maybe that'll be Dylan Cousins. And like I said, that second move, Fabian Zetterlund, it's nice work. As painful as all of that is for me to say, but these are tough decisions, and that's why Steve Staios is here, to make tough decisions. He obviously wasn't quite satisfied with what he was getting out of the group, and saw Josh Norris, perhaps a ticking time bomb, as the guy that was easiest to pluck out of that core and go, yeah, no, we're moving on. And you're the first guy out the door. And maybe it sends the message he wants to send to the rest of the group. Get going. Or there will be more. So, interesting day for the Sens. As I mentioned off the top, Rob will be here on Monday. And no doubt he will have strong opinions on all of this as well. So we'll wait and see what that's all about. If you're looking for a little bit more Sens content, on the last episode of the show that dropped on, when did we put that out? Wednesday evening or Thursday morning? Doesn't matter. It's the previous one on the podcast feed here or at tallcanaudio.com. We had the voice of the Sens, Dean Brown, was here and had a great chat with him. So lots of Sens talk there as well. So go back and check that one out if you wish. This will not be the last one for today. I'll drop another one on what the Leafs did around the NHL Trade Deadline, and maybe, if I'm feeling lusty enough, a third one on what everybody else did. All those other teams out there. It was a busy couple of days, and some big names ended up moving. Some big things ended up happening. So we'll probably drop a couple more of these over the next 12 hours or so. So stay tuned. Get subscribed if you're not already. And we will see you on the next one. Thanks for listening. My name's Matt Robinson. We'll catch you later.
Yo, Canada Warriors are drinking it down. Raise your voices and stare at this town. We're the champions of craft beer and sport. Tall Can Audio, we hold down the fort. Tall Can Warriors.